Hello, everyone. I'm John Rivera from the United Nations Environmental Program. We will give out 5 more minutes for people to join, and we will start in a second. Thank you for your waiting. Okay, I think we can start. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you will find the session interesting. As you know, this is our second session on the webinar series focused on electrification, the transport in the Caribbean countries. The first one was last month. We were talking about the grid electrification impact on the grid on the islands and how it affects, especially the islands in the Caribbean. This month, we would like to focus on the electric mobility, not only as a mobility service, as a improvement of the current transportation, both public and private, but also as a green transformation anchor, and how can the countries, how can different economies take benefit of the electric mobility and electric transformation to bring more benefits into the overall society and economic transformation into a green future. For that, we have Bastian Mans and Christoph Lienemann from PEM MOTION. They will be showing us their ideas and the vision on how can this come true in the Caribbean. For this session, I will thank you if you can do all the questions on the chat so we can talk about that later. I will just pass it on to Christoph to start the presentation. And again, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Bastian and Christoph, for the presentation you are about to give us.
Great, yeah. Let's share the screen. Perfect. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to us. We decided to do it in English. I hope that's fine for you. My Spanish is not so good yet. Still, I'm learning, estoy estudiando, es muy difícil, pero yo hablo inglés muy bien, so therefore I've switched to English now. It's difficult times. I would love to be in front of an audience, and with this coronavirus, we are all, I think, very much affected, and it's a worldwide pandemic. Even the smallest islands are somehow affected, but also the mobility, as we know, is really changing. So if we check how this affects on Berlin, Basti? Yeah, so here you see a typical day in Berlin traffic, and 2019, and just 1 year later with the pandemic, you see that traffic mobility, the way we use buses, cars, metro, really changed due to the effects of the pandemic, to the lockdown, and also the social distancing. And somehow a few cities used this chance and came up with new solutions. Here in Berlin, we see 72% reduction in traffic. In Paris, it was even up to 98%, so even much higher reduction in this 1 year period. The question now, if this is really good. Yeah? So if you go to the next slide, you see an example of German cities. They created bike or pop-up bike lanes where basically some roads were, part of the roads were closed to allow bicycles to ride there, and this was done in many cities across Europe, and somehow it still works. Yeah, so everything what wasn't possible in the last years, where everyone said no, we cannot do this, it will affect the traffic so much, suddenly became possible, and created also a mind change in the people using cars and bicycles. So it's much safer now to drive a bicycle. It's more people do it, more people rely on it. Of course, the question is now, moving to the winter, how this will behave. But still, in my opinion, Corona showed us that a change in mobility is possible, and it's possible already today if you do it. So in the end, it's better like it is right now, and we still have better traffic, less reduction. Of course, now we need to plan ahead if everything comes to normal again, how to work on that. So this as an introduction, but let me introduce ourselves first, so you know who is talking. My name is Christoph Lienemann. I'm leading the PEM MOTION team in North and Central America. PEM MOTION is a company, we focus on electric mobility, future mobility topics, and it all started here in Germany with the street scooter project. I don't know if you're familiar with the street scooter project. It was an idea in 2009 here in Aachen in Germany, where at the university we thought, okay, it must be possible to produce electric cars for an affordable price and for a mass production, and also produce it here in Germany in a very high wage country. So back then there was there was Tesla, but there was only the Tesla Roadster available. So no one was talking about the Model S, and Elon Musk was also not really involved yet. And here in Germany, I mean, being a university, everyone laughed at us and thought, okay, a nice use project, but not really focusing on something. So we continued, built the first prototype, and back then the DHL, Deutsche Post, got very interested in electric vehicles, because they not only want to get more sustainable in their operations, delivering packages, but also they want to save money. And for them, it's a perfect use case, a lot of stops. You can basically calculate the route, so you don't need long distances. You know how long you're driving, and also the processes can be optimized with electric vehicles. So they asked Volkswagen, they asked Mercedes-Benz, they asked a lot of companies, and everyone said, no, electric mobility, this is nothing, it won't happen, so we won't develop something for you. And yeah, we had back then, we were on the IAA, the automotive show, and actually Angela Merkel sat in our first prototype, which was an amazing honor. And she touched the screen, and she didn't talk about the car, she didn't talk about anything, but she touched the screen, and there was Angry Birds installed. So there's even a video on YouTube. So she's like, oh, Angry Birds, and starts playing in the vehicle. And that was basically how DHL got interested in it. So we were asked to build 100 prototypes together with the delivery people and optimize basically their operations and put it into practice in a trial. And it was so successful that DHL decided to buy the company 2014 completely. And yeah, now it's the biggest electric vehicle fleet in Europe. And they are producing in 3 factories here in Germany, electric vehicles and batteries. So quite an amazing success story for us. And this is how it all started. And now we want to give this back to other companies, other countries, other regions with our experience with more than 10 years in this field. And that's why PEM MOTION, if you go to next slide, we have 2 areas. We in the first area work with companies in their projects, help them in their engineering, bringing the products on the road, the innovation on the road, and also do consultant services, help regions how to develop more sustainable, how to do innovation, how to create jobs, and local sustainability. So that's what I'm talking about for today. And we have PEMX, where we also invest in own companies, have our own ideas, and create new companies. Currently, we have 7 own companies with another 108 employees, and they focus on new innovations. And of course, we want to apply this also to countries like Central America or the Caribbean. We have locations in different fields in Germany and in North America. In Mexico, we have 2 locations, in Monterrey and in San Luis Potosí. And in the US, we are in Sacramento, California. And currently, we are also working with the Dominican Republic and the Caribbean on moving further there. Talking about future mobility, there are basically 4 trends we see in future mobility, where e-mobility is one of them. Yeah, so everything will be electrified, or most of the vehicles will be electrified either by batteries or by hydrogen. But we also have trends like autonomous driving, connected vehicles, and shared driving. So these are for us the 4 main trends who will affect the mobility we know quite significantly. Today, I want to talk about the e-mobility. So if we dive a bit deeper, we see that a lot of people make predictions how much the market share of electric vehicles will be in Europe, in US, and China. And you can basically find a study for 10%, you can find a study for 100%. So somehow the truth is somewhere in between. But what all the studies have in common is that there is definitely electric mobility coming. So there will be a change in the car, we know. If you see how the value chain or the value creation of the vehicle, Basti, can you go to the next slide? Is affecting, if you look at a classical car, there's a lot of value created in the powertrain, and all this will be gone. It's very classical mechanical engineering topics, drilling, machining, casting. So all this will be not in the car anymore. And if you see a battery electric car, there's a big change that now the battery is the most valuable part in the battery, in the electric car, but also you have much less parts in the electric car and much less wear. So this will affect not only the car itself, but also all the companies who produce this kind of components. And on the other hand, it will offer a lot of opportunities for new innovation, for new companies to fill these gaps or to enter these new fields. But also forms of mobility, if you go to the next slides, will change. Yeah? So there will be not only cars and trucks, there will be smaller vehicles, bikes, scooters, even drones. Yeah, so our vision is to cut the costs by 50% of mobility. If you go to the next slide, we see some of our infrastructure. So here in Aachen, we work on bringing this innovation on the road. If you go further, you see a few projects. So we really are interested in creating innovation, not only in the vehicles, but also in the components and also in other forms of mobility. Yeah, so let's say a bike or another form, or a small car or a drone. And this offers so much potential for startups, for companies who are currently maybe not on the market yet, but can be also successful in the future. And they don't need to come necessarily from the classical automotive countries like Germany, France, or Japan. So there's quite a big opportunity for Latin American countries to fill this gap and to dive in. And therefore, I would like to give the word to my colleague, Bastian Manz, who is the expert for the Caribbean market, and will talk about a bit more in detail how we think the Caribbean is interesting for electric mobility. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Christoph. Hi, everybody. My name is Bastian Manz. I'm working with PEM for now 2.5 years, and for 1 year for our Mexican location here in San Luis Potosí, or one of our 2 Mexican locations. And I'm going to present a little bit about the Caribbean, about the challenges, but also about potential actions that can be taken, and how our strategy would look like for the creation of a sustainable environment. And at the end, we will also have a look at our initiatives that we already have in the Caribbean and in Central America. Christoph already mentioned it. For example, in the Dominican Republic, we are also working on some initiatives to promote electric mobility. So we're going to shed, and I'm going to shed a lot of light on this. But let's start with the Caribbean. So the Caribbean islands across the Gulf of Mexico share a lot of similar conditions. First of all, there's a high potential for renewable energy production within the Caribbean. So, for example, solar energy, but also hydro energy, as well as biomass energy can be accessed here. Furthermore, it's quite favorable for electric mobility due to limited space. So there's only short distances, especially, and it also makes sense, especially if you look at the geographics of the Caribbean. There's a lot of small islands, so this is very much in favor for electric mobility. Furthermore, we already have a lot of legal conditions that are already put in place, and if not so, many governments have already announced that they want to address this issue. In specific, focusing on renewable energy production, but as well as transportation targets. One example can be there, for example, the islands of Barbados already announced that they target 100% renewable energy production by 2030, as well as 100% share of electric public fleets. So they are going to switch until 2030 also their entire fleets. And these legal conditions, these measurements also in many cases have the reduction or the elimination of import duties as well as taxes. Furthermore, what is also quite common among Caribbean countries is that there's a high utilization of general fleets. For example, governmental fleets, but also commercial fleets, a lot of public fleets, for example, buses, public transportation, but also last mile delivery is something that we see in many countries many times. And these conditions, in our mind, have the potential to really accelerate the transition to electric and sustainable mobility. But at the same time, all the Caribbeans are also faced with a lot of challenges. Being the major one, the high consumption and dependency of fossil fuels, as you can see on the right, there's a selection of 5 countries: Barbados, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, Jamaica, and the Dominican Republic. And it displays their energy mix that they're using right now to power up their countries. And you can already see it, it's pretty dominated by fossil fuels, by oil products, natural gas also. There's rarely renewable energies. On the right, the Dominican Republic, for example, is already involved in a good portion of hydro energy, but nevertheless, it's still very dominant by fossil fuels. And of course, this is a high challenge to change this, especially if you have governments that were relying on taxes and incomes that were generated throughout the past decades only by employing these powers and these energy production. Furthermore, there's still a lack of charging infrastructure. So to fully deploy electric mobility across all countries in the Caribbean, there needs to be more charging infrastructure. Then we are lacking of trained personnel, so the know-how of how to maintain electric vehicles, but also how to educate people about electric vehicles is still missing and not, or still has potential to grow. And especially also car dealers also are still not convinced yet how to sell an electric vehicle, or are still having doubts that electric vehicles might not sell in the future. So we see the Caribbean countries are still faced with a lot of challenges in that way. Nevertheless, already there are straight actions that can be taken to facilitate and to accelerate also the transition to electric mobility. And especially the governments are playing a huge part in this, because they really need to, and they are in this case the pacemakers. So they are really setting the tone, and so far we found that many governments are still not completely analyzing the full effects that the adoption to electric vehicles in the long run would mean for their budgets, would mean for their fiscal effects as well. And at the same time, once they've done so, the goal should be to commit really to this and also communicate this to car manufacturers, to dealers, but also to local authorities within their countries, and to really take the lead in doing this and being also a role model for their people in this way. And thirdly, governments also, of course, have the opportunity to really electrify and to really start this transition by the electrification of, for example, public transport. I've mentioned it 2 slides earlier. There's also a lot of fleets being employed in the Caribbean. So they have the opportunity to really electrify these fleets and also act as a role model, and also maybe set the initial spark for the industry to follow afterwards. But then at the same time, as I already mentioned, public awareness still needs to be increased, or there needs to be more education being done to tell people about the benefits and to sensitize them also. And especially utility companies are playing a big role in this as well, because utility companies are the ones that are going to be heavily involved in the setting up of electric mobility, especially for the charging infrastructures, and they can also be an important key factor to accelerate this this transition. And they really need to realize their potential to grow throughout electric mobility. And last but not least, of course, electric mobility, especially in the Caribbean, is something that needs to be deployed locally, which is something you're gonna realize, or which I'm going to talk about throughout the next slides as well. So governments and countries and universities, of course, can also have a big stake in promoting e-mobility by supporting local innovation and local startups. So let's talk about how PEM Motion does approach a sustainable ecosystem. How do we visualize our perfect sustainable ecosystem? For us, there are 5 key pillars that we need to address depending on where we are going to deploy, where we're going to look and want to establish the sustainable ecosystem. So it's really dependent on the region, to which extent we are really going into these 5 pillars. But these 5 pillars are the mobility, ecology, the energy sector, production, speaking of local products and promoting local production, as well as the living environment. And for our approach for the Caribbean, to have a quick start in the Caribbean, it makes sense to look on 3 main pillars, which are obviously the mobility section, covering electric vehicles, but also the infrastructure, as well as traffic relief. This is really interesting, especially in urban areas. Then also the energy production, because of course it makes sense electric mobility is as green as the energy mix or the energy mix that is being provided and that is being used. So we get the maximum of sustainable effects and sustainable effects by having 100% green energy mix, just being supplied by sustainable and renewable energies. And as a third point is the local production. So let's dive into these 3 points a little bit more in depth. Let's start with mobility. So what we usually do to address the mobility section for an urban sustainable environment is that we start by assessing the characteristics of the region. So we really see and analyze, okay, which conditions are there, which might be the demand that we need for a sustainable transportation system or a sustainable mobility mix. And we come up with clusters and characteristics. And depending on this, we really do the definition of the necessary and suiting mobility mix that is or that can be a good option for that region. So this is really depending on the region, what is necessary, what do people want, what does the region require. So for example, if we're looking now to the circle on the left, which is an example, I think, of our base town, our base city in Germany, in Aachen. So this is an urban region. So for urban region, for example, it's probably most likely to be more important to deploy a mobility mix, including micro-mobility solutions, such as the electric scooter, which you can see here on the right, but as well as the e-bike. There's also kick scooters, which recently gained a lot of popularity across the world. So this is rather an urban approach to deploy a mobility mix. But on the other side, it can also be possible that in a more rural area, it's more necessary to have cargo electric vehicles, which you can also see here in the right side with the street scooter. So depending really on which region we are looking at, we are selecting and choosing our mobility mix. Along with this, of course, is also the question of which infrastructure do we need and where do we need it. So we need to have a smart infrastructure grid in many cases, and even now today, charging stations or mobility stations can be deployed, which will then have the opportunity to charge more mobility solutions like e-scooters or e-bikes, as well as they have the option to include, for example, packing stations, so basically other fulfill other purposes as well, or battery charging stations, and these can be supplied by energy and power with solar cells on the roof, for example. Then another important point is also the traffic relief. That also applies more to urban areas. So we are taking a close look and we are analyzing really what is the cause of the traffic at the moment, what is responsible for this, and how can mobility solutions or even future mobility solutions that are not on the market yet, how can these solutions affect this and make it more fluent with less waiting time and of course less pollution at the same time as well. So that was the first part of the mobility section. Now let's have a closer look at the energy part. There in particular, we're going to have a look at the energy production. As I already mentioned, energy production is key also to the sustainability level of electric vehicles or transportation means, as well as on the energy storage. So at PEM, we are assessing also, depending on the region, which energy solutions, renewable energy solutions, we are going to apply, going to use. We have already a big range of existing renewable technologies such as solar energy, wind energy, but also hydro energy or geothermal energy, which can all be used already. And in many cases, we also experience that even though we have these technologies, which, for example, in the case of solar energy and wind energy, already have a high degree of maturity, we still witness that people and these technologies are still not being implemented correctly and are still losing potential. So it's really about to see the conditions, to see the requirements for these solutions, and then implement them and establish them at the correct place. Nevertheless, all renewable energy sources share a common challenge. So you need to have a possibility to store the energy, to make it accessible at all times. So you just can't use the energy whenever it's being produced, and also have it at night, for example. So for this part, we are using our approach to remanufacture, to recycle old batteries. This can be seen on the right side. So from the principle, it's pretty easy. You take old car batteries, for example, collect them and recycle them, and after that you assemble them in stationary storage systems, which can then be used for various services, such as, for example, charging stations for electric vehicles, but also they can be used for corporate purposes. And also, if you think of the Caribbean and these many small islands, this can be, of course, also an option to make energy accessible at an island where you usually would just have generators, where you usually would just be burning fuel. So this creates, in this way, their start of their second life as an energy storage. But then at the same time, we of course also look into new storage mediums, and you all heard it, and it's also been pretty popular in the past years and gaining more popularity. For example, hydrogen is one of these options which has the opportunity to act as both being a propulsion fuel and act as an energy storage. So by creating storages that are based on hydrogen, you can address both issues, both the transportation issue, but the transportation need, and for example, create at the same time infrastructure to fuel hydrogen cars, but then at the same time we also have a smart energy storage, which can also be used for other applications. And finally, after introducing mobility and energy, let's have a look at local production. Local production is also key for us, and our solution so far has been the establishment of ramp-up factories, of local ramp-up factories within regions, various regions, and for example, we have a ramp-up factory, as Christoph mentioned. The street scooter has been developed in a ramp-up factory in Germany, and this concept, let me explain you this concept a little bit. It's an open space where you can find all necessary machinery that you need to produce electric vehicles to a small batch price, or for a small batch price. So there can be this can be an electric vehicle assembly line. There can be small machines like 3D printers. So the idea is that this is a common space for startups, for small companies, for SMEs, but also for OEMs or research institutions like universities that use the space and the network behind it to get together and develop innovations and have a way to cost efficiently produce their prototypes in the beginning, and even produce smaller batch sizes and really develop their project within and their product within the ramp-up factory. So this is, we have great experiences with this. In Aachen, in the Netherlands, we have another one. Right now, we are currently establishing one in Sacramento, which is the the California Mobility Center. And we see this, we have made these experiences, these ramp-up factories really facilitate and accelerate local innovation production. So especially throughout the combination of universities being involved with startups, and also smaller companies, as well as OEMs, this creates a quite innovative environment. And as I'm going to show you in the next slide, this is also our approach for the Caribbean, because it's a way to promote local production. It's a way to make use of local resources, of creating local innovations as well. So let's have a look of our initiatives that we already started in the Caribbean and Central America. As you can see, and as I already mentioned throughout this presentation, Mexico is our home base. So we are having this office, or our offices here, our location here, for almost 3 years now. And of course, this is also the reason why we are most involved within this region. But for example, we already established here a ramp-up factory in Monterrey together with some local partners. We have been involved in the electrification of a cargo vehicle in Mexico, as well as the involvement in university courses, but also we are in constant dialogue with the German embassy in terms of sustainability and how to promote this in Mexico. Furthermore, as Christoph already mentioned, we are right now also in discussions with partners in the Dominican Republic. There, our target is to establish a local electric vehicle production, which is then probably going to be an assembly, so to supply the local region to meet local demand in the Dominican Republic, but also in the long run to manufacture or to assembly electric vehicles in the Dominican Republic, which are then being exported to North America, for example, or within the Caribbean or even Central America. In Costa Rica, we've been also in discussions and involved with local partners for the past 9 months, pretty much, almost the entire year. We also want to build up a ramp-up factory there. Costa Rica is also a very interesting country for last mile deliveries, shares similar conditions as the Caribbean islands. The distance is also not that long. So it's for us, it makes a very great business case also. And for that reason, we are also thinking about ways how to develop businesses, especially for shared mobility within that region. So that was a quick look out into the Caribbean, and we're gonna finish this off with a summary by my colleague Christoph.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bastian. I also learned a lot again. Great that you are working so interested in the Caribbean. It's for us really an interesting region. We think that it offers a lot of potential for our own innovation. We see a lot of mixed fleets with very unique mobility requirements. We also see a lot of strong partners and universities in the region. So far, I was only in contact with Dominican Republican players, but I think it looks like for the others as well. So for us, it's very interesting to reach out to expand our network there. So please contact us. We are always interested in reaching out and expanding. We see also that the pollution and traffic is really pushing for a sustainable and smarter solution in mobility, but also the current discussion about cleaner and, Greta Thunberg, sustainable development locally, but also all our partners from international organizations like the United Nations. And thank you very much for having this discussion with us to offer this opportunity. I know Joan now, I think almost 2 years, and it's very great to collaborate in this larger project, having the same mindset in bringing change and making it a sustainable world altogether. And therefore, we think it's the right momentum to create own solutions for sustainable mobility locally. And we urge you to join us in working on together, realizing the future of mobility in the Caribbean and also in Latin America together, and doing it right now and not to wait. Thank you very much, and looking forward for your questions.
Thank you so much, Christoph and Bastian, for your presentation. I think it gives out a lot of ideas and a new approach to the normal conversation about electric mobility in the region. I think I wrote down some ideas that I would like to overview with you again. The first one, the change of the value creation from a normal vehicle to electric vehicle, the change from the powertrain to the battery, and then it changes how the vehicle can be made, right? How many countries are actually taking benefit of the creation of the whole value chain of the vehicle. That is, for me, is really important also because some months ago, the ECLAC from the United Nations, also based in Santiago, issued a study saying that the new trends on globalization will be regionalization, so that the economies will be more regional rather than global. That will actually make the point of, how this electrification and electric vehicle provision can also play a big change on how the Caribbean and the Latin American countries can get in and profit from all this new situation. And I know it's very dramatic and we are in a crisis, but as we always say, we have to somehow we have to get out from where we are, and this can be a major change on how we can look forward. In terms of the three main points that you were talking about on local production, mobility, and energy, I will also add, if I may, education. I think that and transformation of the economy in terms of gender perspective also, because then this comes out as a whole new industry that can be approached from the idea of the gender perspective, and how can women get into new jobs that are based not on the traditional view of a mechanical guy, you know, with all the oily hands, but more into technology and computers and all those kind of things. So also I would like to add that. There is a question over here. I also have a few more questions by myself, but I will give out these ones. They say, my question is, why going straight to electricity without giving a chance to biofuels, biodiesel and biogas in the Chilean case? And the other one is there a good opportunity for vehicle to grid technology for the Caribbean in the next 5 years?
Can you repeat that? Sorry, I didn't get it.
Oops, just. So is there a good opportunity for vehicle to grid technology for the Caribbean in the next 5 years or so?
Okay, yeah, thank you for the questions. Maybe to start with your questions quickly. The study you mentioned, I think we see the same trend for relocalization or bringing the production more locally, especially in the crisis. We have seen that a lot of value chain is dependent on a global level, yeah? And there was a lot of factories were not producing because in China the factories were not producing. So even though the regions were not affected by the virus yet, they still didn't have a chance to produce and were also hit quite heavy on an economic level. And definitely there's a trend to bring some production more locally. On the other hand, in some goods like the battery cells, for example, it makes sense to scale and to produce on a big scale. So we definitely will not see a battery cell production in the Caribbean, but maybe we see some semi-knockdown assembly. That's actually the project Bastian was mentioned for the Dominican Republic. So they basically produce parts of the vehicle in China, send it over, and the assembly and the fitting is done in the Caribbean. This offers also more advantages on a tax level, but also we see a lot of fitting for the market in the region itself. So you can much better adjust your kind of vehicle for the use case you need it locally. Yeah? So if you have like a big production plant of Volkswagen, they cannot produce now a single unit just for the use case of, I don't know, we for example have a company with street scooter, they drive the grid lines to make checks, and they had like a special thing they needed on the vehicle to check the grid lines. Yeah, and we built 10 vehicles, I think, for them. And in the end, a Volkswagen wouldn't do that, but maybe you can do this locally in the Caribbean. And so therefore we see a large potential for this, and also local innovation. And that brings me to the next point, the education topic. You saw the circle. Education definitely is also a very important point for us. We work in Mexico with quite a lot of universities to do knowledge transfer. So we are personally interested in bringing everything we learned in the last 10 years here in Germany with electrification to other countries and help them to develop their own their own innovation network, because in the end it just creates new ideas and new opportunities. And we have quite a large project with BMW where we work with 4 local universities and offer the students like an in-depth training in the BMW plant, and they get even credits for it. So that's, for example, one thing we do in Mexico, and we think this is very, very important talent, training them for the future jobs, and also create the right mindset to be innovative, to be self-thinking. And this is basically the gender perspective you were mentioning. In my opinion, there's so much potential also on the women's side to integrate them more in projects. And our team in Mexico is actually 50-50. So we fully believe that this is a very important thing to have a gender perspective in everything we do. Of course, will still take some time and education, but that's why we start on a very early level. I hope that answers your questions. And yeah, thank you for the questions from the audience. The first one was, why going straight to e-mobility instead of using biofuels? I wouldn't say not to use biofuels. Definitely for long distances, for heavy use, there's definitely need for biofuels. We as PEM, I have no ideas about biofuels. We only work with batteries and electric motors. That's why I can only talk about that. I'm very happy if someone else takes over for the biofuels, and we think it's of course more sustainable than using diesel or normal energy, and this will be also for the longer distances, for the heavy use, a very interesting opportunity in the future. But coming from the other side, we think there's already also some chances for e-mobility right now. Vehicle to grid, yeah, to be honest, I'm not familiar with a grid in Caribbean. Maybe Basti, you can answer this better, but I think in general the technology is not so far and has a lot of challenges also here in Europe, which needs to be solved first before applying it. But Basti, maybe you can add something.
Just to this point that the grid, at least for power supply, is of course a big topic in the Caribbean. Also since the Caribbean are much more vulnerable to effects of the climate change. Just if you think back of Hurricane Irma, I think it was 2017, that destroyed huge parts of the Caribbean. So that's definitely a part, but I think there's also still, or there still needs to be a lot done. As you recall, the energy mix that we've seen, so far it's still dominated by oil. And to have a more stable grip, we see it's necessary that we integrate more and different energy supplies to also have it more resilient.
Thank you so much for your answers. We have many more questions. I hope we can make them all. There are a few interested in the example that you were talking about of the Dominican Republic. It says a great business case. How will the supply chain in the Caribbean work? Will the Dominican Republic export to other islands? Will be there opportunities for other dealerships in other islands? And then how, just the same example, a little bit more broad, how can a small local production lines compete with large globalized OEMs?
Okay, I think I'm just gonna answer or try to answer this. So the supply chain and which opportunities there are specifically from the Dominican Republic to the Caribbean and further, that's something that we're going to evaluate now and also in the coming weeks and months. What we do know so far is that we are seeing an increased demand for electric mobility, especially also in the Dominican Republic, and that they have a very profitable location. Let's say it like this, and this is going to influence, I think, future productions as well, especially in the Caribbean, and also in the ways of competing with big OEMs. Because, for example, for this case, there is, for example, a trade agreement from the Dominican Republic with the United States. So they save import taxes or export taxes if you export it from the Dominican Republic. And these type of incentives is something that we see critical also in the future, because this can also really push local production or local assembly and also local demand, because it makes e-mobility also accessible and also local products accessible where you are in the Caribbean without having to import a full vehicle and also without paying duties or import taxes.
Yes, I think that I was thinking about the same idea. What does Dominican Republic has that can be transported or can be replicated in other Caribbean countries? And as you say, I think the fiscal incentives are very important. But also and tell me if I'm wrong, but in terms of competing with large OEMs, is what Christoph said, is that from what I see from electric vehicles, it seems that it is more feasible to do the last part of the whole value chain, the part of assembly at a local level, that you can actually assembly the motor and all the big part into whatever comes on top. That is whatever comes on top that is locally like meeting the local necessities, right? So that's the big thing, the big change.
Yeah, exactly. And one point to add, especially to this, is also throughout this presentation, we've also seen that e-mobility, especially now in the phase of being implemented into countries, also for first pilot projects or something like this, is really based on the purpose and on the use case, how we call it at PEM, for which you're going to do it. So, and in many cases, the market can't serve all these different requirements for these particular use cases. So this is why it's so important to also establish like local assemblies or local production site or local innovation sites like the ramp-up factory, for example, to have the ability to take products off the market and remanufacture them, or take cars that you already have and retrofit them with an electric motor kit, for example, or redesign them to being electrified then, to really meet these demands, because the vast market or large market can't supply all these particular requirements and specific requirements.
Yes, I think that's what we saw a few years ago in Mexico, also with Bimbo, that it was as DHL was looking right for special vehicles that they require. Nobody will give them out for them. They will be manufacturing for them, and they do it themselves. So I think that's the big opportunity in terms of electric vehicles, that they will not just add value to the normal electric ICE cars manufacturing countries as Germany, China, the States, but it can actually spread around. That I think that the impact, economic impact, employment impact that can have is very need right now and for the coming years. So I think that it will be really good. We have two questions regarding the training support. They say explain a little bit on the training support and how has been the answer or the reaction of the students in the university in relationship to the courses about this subject.
Quite
So
specific.
is they interested or they are not interested, and how is relationship with BMW?
Yeah, so the relationship with BMW, it's one of our biggest partners also here in Europe. They built a new plant in San Luis Potosí, and we basically went with them there and started training the employees. We trained more than 1,000 people in the last 2 years. And one of the projects there was also or still is ongoing with the universities. And we basically offer a half-year internship where we, in the first 2 months, give them courses here from the RWTH Aachen University, so one of the largest tech universities here in Europe. And we train them in, for example, logistics, electric mobility, and all this kind of topics. So we do the knowledge transfer from the university. Then they take first exams. They get credits for those exams for their universities. And then they go into, or already in between, they go into production in BMW, and they are some kind of a we call them floor walker. So they are on the floor, be there for the operators at the machines, at the logistic processes, to be quickly answering, solving problems, and also on the other hand be the communication between the operators and the management and the planning or the engineers. There's normally a quite big gap, especially if you have Germans and Mexicans, and they are somehow like the gaps, or filling the gap and solving problems, and in the end improving the process of BMW. It's a very successful project. The students love it. Yeah, so they get firsthand working experience, they get paid, and they get credits. Yeah, so they don't lose time for their courses. And more than 38% were hired. So we are now in the 4th year. So more than 38% were hired afterwards by BMW already. Yeah? So that's also a great step for moving into the automotive business. And in general, it's a quite successful project. We have a lot of other projects with universities, and for us, this is really important. So I mean, here in Germany, our main shareholder is Professor Kamka, and he's the professor for electric mobility here at Aachen University. So we have already the connection here, and we try to now establish connections with other universities worldwide.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think the time is already, we passed the time. There are other questions that, if you allow me, I will send it to you so we can upload the answers to the website. Just to let you know, this session and the other sessions will be online on our website, movelatam.org. So you can go there. They will show also the next session. I would like to show you the next sessions that we will have for the Caribbean region. The session in November will be on the tourist fleet electrification and the case in Costa Rica, on the project of Rutas de Monteverde. That is quite interesting how they are approaching the green tourism in this particular region with electric vehicles and electric chariots. And in December, we will have Linda Holder, the Chief Operation Officer of the Transport Board, that is a transport operation in Barbados, telling us about the new electric buses that went into operation last month or 2 months ago. So thank you so much, Christoph and Bastian, for the presentation, for the answers to all the questions. Thank you so much, everyone else, for attending the session, and see you next month. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye, guys.